Today is Thursday, January 27th, 2011, and my name is MROHP. I am interviewing Gail Rowe, who is a current member of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County and has been a longtime member of the League. The interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program. The interview is being filmed by MROHP. So my first question to you, Gail, is to tell when and where you were born.
I'll be glad to. I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, February 23rd, 1933, a long time ago, but a beautiful little town.
Well, I've actually been in the environs of Asheville because I've just been there, and it's. I have a cousin that lives near there.
Well, it's a lovely place to be from. It was a nice place to grow up. My father at one at one time was a county commissioner, and that was the very beginning of my interest in government. Started that long ago. I lived there 18 years, but I was very fortunate in the summers of 16, 17, 18, and 19. I worked in the original Chautauqua at Chautauqua, New York. So when I came to Boulder, it was just wonderful to find that there was a Chautauqua in Boulder. So it made me feel even more connected to Boulder. And I came in 1973. I came to Boulder in 1973. And I've lived here the longest of anywhere I've ever lived.
So, but before you came to Boulder, can you talk a little bit about other background factors that might have led you into League work and joining the League?
Well, besides my father, interesting enough, in my late 20s, we lived in a place called Idaho Falls, Idaho, which had a national reactor testing station. And don't forget, I was a 50s bride, so at that time our identity was very much to our husbands. And I was at home with small children, but this was just the beginning of television, really. And we did finally have a television, but I listened to the radio. And there was a local league, very small local league, who did voter service on the radio, which was tremendously helpful because I was a very new, as my husband was, resident of that small town. So it helped us be knowledgeable voters, which is the purpose of the league from the very, very beginning.
That is fascinating.
It was. I couldn't belong. I didn't know how to join, but I listened every time they had, and I'm sure the little local radio station only was trying to fill the time, because later on in my life I did it in another town on Saturday mornings, which is dead radio time, but we were able to do programs, and so it was a nice connection.
Right, and you didn't join at that point. But when did you first join the League?
I joined when we moved to Lexington, Kentucky. Children were a little bit older, and I had a little bit more free time, so I think I joined in 1965 in Lexington, Kentucky. And both Lexington and Boulder, Colorado are university towns. And my husband was with IBM, so IBM always put new locations in university towns. So if there's a university town, there's almost always a League of Women Voters. So I was very fortunate. A neighbor invited me. We were talking about political things, and a neighbor said, "Would you like to go to League of Women Voters?" And I practically jumped up and clicked my heels because I was thrilled to be invited. I found a babysitter who would babysit in the daytime, and so that was my very beginning. The thing that frustrated me at that time, unit meetings were supposed to be over at 12, and of course I had a babysitter. I had to pick up the children, and so I would be so upset if they didn't finish at noon because I would miss something. So League was tremendously important to me because it was an opportunity to talk to adults, and they were many times other women who wanted this, and of course we had the guidance of League and program to work to and from and for. So it was a wonderful eye-opening experience, and I was in Lexington, Kentucky for 10 years, and those were my most active years, although I am and was active in Boulder. But it was just such a wonderful new experience that I enjoyed it so much, and laid the foundation for the rest of my life.
What kinds of things were you involved with in Lexington?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be elected president of the Lexington League, and it was a 2-year commitment. And I loved doing it, but I vowed I would never do it again, and I have never done it again. I've done other portfolios, but I never did presidency again, because it really is I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say a full-time job, but it is very time-consuming and very rewarding. And you do learn leadership skills and interpersonal skills, and of course, Robert's Rules of Order, which was wonderful. You know, it taught me how to run a meeting and how to judge a meeting, and I find to this day that basic league education carries me through to the resident council, where I live in a retirement community right now. Those same background rules work right here very well.
So the league really laid a foundation then for a lot of your other work in life and
my self-confidence. I think league, because you don't talk about something unless you know what you're talking about, league gives you tremendous self-confidence to do public speaking.
Well, that's a great lead-in to your coming to Boulder. And when you first came here, of course, again, it was a university town, but what was your experience in terms of observing life here in Boulder?
Well, before we moved, the Blue Line had just been established, and I hope your viewers know about the Blue Line, because it was tremendously important and of course impacts our Boulder today. So that was wonderful to know about the Blue Line. So we had that background of how good the government really was here. And so of course, our house was not finished. We had to live in a motel. So I saw a league meeting listed in the local paper. So I went to a league luncheon out at a building on East Arapahoe, which doesn't even exist anymore. And I was, of course, welcomed with open arms, because league is a very inviting organization. The only requirement for membership is that you be a citizen, and that's because our voting is so important. You don't have to be a native born citizen, you just have to be a citizen, and that is the only requirement for membership. So I was welcomed and eventually got into units and all the other phases of league. But we were in the motel and I saw it in the paper and I said, oh, my family, and I ran, because league educates you for local government. And you know, there's an old saying, all action is local. Well, league, it's most emotional. Your local work is absolutely the most emotional. So when you move to a new community, you need to learn the local government. Local, community, state, county, you need to know that. National, you're probably okay, but you don't know quite where you are locally, and it's just the best education anybody can have, even so true today.
So the League of Women Voters, looking at it now sort of from the inside, is a place where mostly women get educated about aspects of public life, like public speaking, having meetings, engaging in government. Can you give some experiences or observations about how the Boulder League, you know, works?
And Maria, I've got to go back to the very beginning. We're an outgrowth of the suffrage movement, absolutely, because the women, the suffragettes, had worked so long and so hard for the right to vote that once they had that, they respected it, and they thought, we must cast an intelligent vote. We are not going to throw our vote away for this, that, and the other. We really need to know, because it was so important that we got this vote. So League is an outgrowth of that movement, and that's why we study on 3 levels, local, state, and national, because those are elections we have. So we work on all 3 levels. And I think it just is the eye-opener on how things are done, how meetings are run, because they're always a little different in every community, particularly the local city council or county. Everyone is a little bit different. So it's fun to see the difference, and it's also fun to learn how they work. And League also gives you the self-confidence if there's an issue that you need to speak about, then you know you can go because you can answer questions and you've done your homework. You can speak on the issue, speak for it usually. We do occasionally speak against, but mostly we speak for issues and never candidates. We always only endorse issues. And we work on campaigns for issues. When there's going to be an issue on the ballot, we work for that to this day.
Now, comparing, say, Lexington and Boulder, did you find, you say everything's a little different, like what were some of the little differences or big differences?
It's been a long time. Certainly the times have changed. Boulder was more open for women even then, because when we would go to a city council meeting in Lexington, the men would come, oh, there she is. And we as women made sure we were dressed very appropriately and very carefully to go to those meetings. But we were treated with respect. We also, of course, went to the state legislature and lobbied, just as we do here, and just as we do on the national level. League does lobby for our issues. So Boulder was probably, it was bigger and a little more open. So Boulder was probably a little more progressive, but they were both good. They're both still good communities.
Well, I was also thinking that probably Lexington being part of the South, there might have been a lot of turmoil and issues during the 60s.
And that was a wonderful time to be there. And of course, League was a wonderful organization to belong to. But we didn't have any riots or. Kentucky is a little more northern. It's not Mississippi. And people who've never lived there sort of want to make a generalization about the South. But Lexington, particularly because it was a university town, the state itself has gotten very Republican lately, but it was not always true. We had a couple of very liberal Democratic governors in the 60s that did lots of good things for the state. But right now, it's more Republican than I would like it to be.
So you actually found that when you joined the League, there's tremendous similarities.
Oh, absolutely.
In moving across the country, and the organization really provides continuity.
Right, because our national positions are the same. And League is structured on all three levels, just as government is. So we are a grassroots organization. So you join the League at your local level. You are a member of the local level, but that also, just as the government, makes you a member of your state or your national league. So leaders from the state league come from all the local leagues. Leaders for the national come from state leagues. So we're structured just as our government is. And so, yes, you are automatically a member of all three levels, and we are a grassroots organization.
Okay, also thinking of building women's leadership. In Boulder, it's been said that it really provides, as you've stated already, that it provides this education. In Boulder, some people have said that it actually, the League provided kind of an entryway for certain individual women then to go into politics.
Absolutely, Anne-Marie, absolutely. We contributed, and I say League, we contributed some outstanding people to the Boulder community, and to some degree we still do, but women's role has changed, and I think it's because League did the groundwork so that women were free. We were freer to choose what we wanted to do. We weren't categorized by our husband's position by any means, so women can do what they need or want to do. But yes, and not only the elected officials, Janet Roberts and certainly Ruth Carell, and several other women, Annette Anderson, I think you're going to interview, and she was on city council. A lot of really outstanding women contributed to Boulder's government. And Ruth was the mayor for quite some time and a very effective, and during some turbulent times even in Boulder. She was very, very good, and we were always proud of her. But I'm sorry Janet is gone, because she kept tremendous records of the League, and I don't know where her records are, but maybe you can find them and use them. I would love for that to happen.
Well, I will check into that.
I don't know where they are, unfortunately.
I didn't realize that. Oh.
Deborah Hayes might know, but Janet had terrific records.
Well, I know that some of the records are deposited at Norland Library, and those may be ones that she kept. But
I don't know. I'm sorry. I just don't know.
double check on that.
We're talking too much one-on-one, but that's okay.
Now, the other aspect of preparing women for leadership is that perhaps maybe individual women actually mentor other women that are, assuming positions of responsibility. Have you witnessed or observed or actually done some mentoring?
Well, I don't think it's so much one-on-one. I think league, because our basic unit is a unit. It's called a unit. They're usually kept to no more than 12 members. In the early days, because we didn't have anywhere else to meet, we always met in each other's houses, in each other's living rooms. And that was certainly true in Boulder when I came. And so we very much supported each other. And the ones who went ahead of those early women, I don't know, but I think it's the organization itself and the way it's organized that is more, not so much one-on-one, although you could always get help on any issue from any member. You could call her up and say, I don't understand this, I don't understand that, and you would get an explanation. But we did that at units, because a unit was a pretty cohesive group of women, and usually you could go units depending on the size of your league, and the Boulder League has stayed at 200 members pretty consistently, and that's what we try to do. So, and of course not everybody attends unit, but you could attend any unit in your neighborhood, but usually the same people went regularly to the same unit. So you formed friendships and you formed groups you were comfortable with, so you could ask any question, particularly on an issue that we were just studying, and that's what we do first. We study an issue. We have a committee, and the committee does the research. They present their material, and out of that grows a program item, which is then voted on once a year at our annual meeting, decide how we're going to have it worded and how we're going to support it. Because then we do have action, and that's the final step. We are able to act. And so league nowadays is considered slow, because we have to go through all those steps before we can take action in the name of the league. And so we are somewhat dated, because there are what we call special interest groups who work on just one issue, and that's their baby, and that's all they do. And league has always considered all three levels of government, and we carry our positions both up and down all three levels of government.
It's interesting that you say it's considered slow.
It is, yes, nowadays.
And that's in contrast to maybe other advocacy groups?
Well, certainly the Tea Party. I'm sorry. Yes. And as I say, special interest, one issue, I should probably say one issue groups, because they just work on one thing, and we always have a full agenda, all three levels that we work on. But we are slow, because we don't speak in the name of the league until we know what we're talking about. And that's hard for some young people. And certainly in my day, we were always 30 and above, always. In the early 30s was about as early as we got members. And we still do, because they want our literature, but the women who have full careers and families do not truthfully have a lot of time for league. But they like to have the material, and they like to support the organization. So that's what happens nowadays. But we do pretty consistently hold at 200 members for Boulder Valley. And early on, there was a Longmont League and a Boulder League. And as the school district grew, then we wanted to be able, in our school studies, to consider the entire county. So we're basically the school district boundaries, but we call ourselves the Boulder Valley League of Women Voters. And that includes, primarily the biggest group was Longmont, but we are all one league now.
And so that was a relatively recent change since
Fairly
2000,
recently,
right?
yes. Yeah, maybe 10 years. I'm sorry I don't have the date, but about 10 years. But
Right,
we
and
always
that-
tried to cooperate on county issues, but now we're just one league. And part of that is dropping membership, because young women, and some people think we are too slow, and our name is a little archaic. Even though we can have male members, we are thankful to have them. This was a tremendous subject at national convention at one time, should we change our name so the men feel more welcome, so forth and so on. And we decided not, just because of our history, because we thought historically it was important to keep our name, even though it is a little archaic. And we do have male members. In the early days, primarily they were our husbands, and because they liked the voter information we gave them, and so they wanted to be members. And now we do draw some others. And interestingly enough, when people are getting ready to run for office, sometimes they join the league and we get a run. We're glad to have them, don't misunderstand me, but it's always kind of fun to see that that's when they decide, oh, they need to be a league member.
Well, it has some cachet then.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, as you said, at the local level, the league, I mean, you have a framework, but you also look at the needs or the conditions of your particular area. And I'm wondering what kinds of issues really grabbed your interest when you first came here, and then maybe how they changed over the years, or it just continued?
Well, the one that really, really drew my interest, because I came from Kentucky, where judges had to run against each other and were voted on individually, so they campaigned. And so there was a commission appointed on the state level, and I do believe it had a league member on the commission who put together a proposal which went on the ballot to say that judges would be voted either up or down. They could retain their seat or not. That was the choice. And so they did not have to campaign in any way. They did not have to run against each other in any way. So they were never against another judge. And that was early on. So let's see, that was in the 70s. And that was pretty radical at the time. And there are states that still do not have that condition. And how you get your information to decide on the judges, because not everybody goes to court. The lawyers and the people who have served under the judges are given a questionnaire, and they can evaluate the judge, and then that material is printed in the state blue book. So we have those opinions to help us decide, and people should read that because it's very important. But primarily they're usually retained, but there is always the opportunity to dismiss a judge if necessary.
So you were on a study group that looked at that?
Well, I studied it in league, not on the commission. Not the commission. I was not on the commission. But of course we studied it as league because it was
And
really...
so actually, I didn't realize that Colorado actually had judges that ran against each other.
In the early days, not now. I'm not,
okay,
not since the 70s, yes.
Right. And even then I'm surprised. So.
Yes, it was. And it was very disruptive and not what we want the judicial to be. So that was a very progressive thing. One disappointment, same idea in the same progressive, I think this was still in the 70s, we tried to, but league supported it, redo the state constitution. The Colorado state constitution is very archaic and needs to be revised tremendously, redone, because we stick things into it all the time in the ways that we shouldn't. So there was a commission that drew up a new state constitution. And this went to the people to be voted on, and it was voted down. And League, of course, supported it. So that was a great disappointment, and we are living to this day in 2011 with the results of that, because nobody is willing to take it on again, because it was a tremendous amount of work that did not follow through, and we were all very, very sad about that. And I'm sad about it to this day when we see issues on our ballot to go to the Constitution. It's very sad for Colorado, and I wish that that could be different. And that's a disappointment that League had, yes.
Just to clarify, on the judges issue, was that a statewide then
yes,
concern?
Yes, it was a state issue.
So beyond Boulder.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And it was
because
the whole
there's the
state of
Denver League,
Colorado.
there's the Jefferson County League. You know, I'm not sure about Grand Junction, but yes. Oh, yeah.
So did you ever work with women of the league from other counties?
I was never on the state board. I was invited to be, but that was not my interest at that time. As you know, I became a little more, after 12 years in League, I was ready to branch out, and I worked both for issues and for candidates both. And I enjoyed doing that. And League, as a League board member, we never worked for or in any way publicly identify ourselves with a candidate. And I enjoyed that because it's very invigorating. So to this day, I probably put more money and more resources into issues and candidates, even though I'm a contributing member of League. I like the political.
Well, we'll come back to that maybe a little later.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Democratic women, at that same time when we were meeting in little units in each other's homes, I was on the board of Democratic Women of Boulder County, and we could have our little executive committees in my living room. So, and now, oh heavens, I don't know how many members we have. I'd say over 400. So just in my Boulder time, it's great to see the changes and the awareness. And Democratic women have only one general meeting a month, and that's a luncheon, and the time is scheduled as very best they can so that professional and working women can come to the meetings.
Okay, so in your own personal experience then, you went from being very involved with the League of Women Voters and then actually went verged towards also being interested in Democratic Party politics.
Absolutely, and issues, and local issues too. Even though they might have been League issues, I worked in a little different way than the League way.
So when you came here then, you saw that, I guess, planning Boulder County and green space was one area, and you talked about the judges. Were there other issues in the 70s that the League addressed that caught your interest, or?
Oh my gosh, Anne-Marie, I don't remember. There are always issues. Problems are never completely solved, so we always have issues and they keep coming. I can tell you one that was heart-rending to us, and I have to go back to Lexington, Kentucky. We did a study on the local jails because we had heard that the local jails were very, very poor. So as a group, in those days, we always went at least 2 together, sometimes more, and to go to the jails, there were 4 of us. And as we were touring the facility, which I'm sure was cleaned up and fixed, the women prisoners came to the bars and begged us for sanitary equipment. So that's how awful they were. And you know, we thought if we hadn't done anything else as a League, we saw to it that those women were taken care of, and we were just shocked that they, you know, I can almost cry remembering that now. So that was probably the most emotional thing that I ever did. But unfortunately, it wasn't. Boulder was pretty darn good. You know, Boulder's pretty good. So I don't remember any real other disappointments. The Constitution is the one I remember as being our very best. And one thing we've kept down is periodically there are movements to increase the number of county commissioners. Every now and then a group gets together and decides that the county should have districts and that we should have county commissioners voted to represent a district. And the League does not support that, and we have always worked against that, and so far that particular movement has never passed. It's been ballot issue several times, but we've always been able to hold it the way it is because it is so successful. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's worked well for Boulder County.
I also wanted to ask you about, so basically right now we've covered the issues, is that right, that you were engaged with or that you want to talk about?
Well, I think so. I think the main thing, I need to always emphasize that the main thing that I think the League does best is voter service. We call it voter service. And that is the most important thing, and I worked on that a lot. And it's a lot of work. And at that time, we were the only group that ever had what are called candidates meetings. Now with television, everybody has them. The poor candidates sometimes are overwhelmed. They have to go to so many candidates meetings and they have to fill out so many questionnaires. But we were the first, and we have done that for a number of years, and we still do it. But I don't think it's as important as in the community as it was. But we always tried to be pretty objective, and some of the other organizations very much want to push their particular interests, and that's okay. You know, that's the way the system works. But I think that the voter service is the most important thing League does and did, and that was our original goal in the organization originally, you know.
Right, was to educate the voters.
To educate the voter, exactly.
And you do that through candidate forums, and you publish material?
Yeah, printed materials. We have printed.
That you also write?
Yes. Well, we interview and write, and we send the candidates questionnaires. They fill them out and send them back to us, and we print them together. And particularly when it's an issue, we will say those who oppose say, and those who support say, so that the citizen can read both points of view and make up their own mind. We will tell them on an issue if the League supports this issue, or we'll say the League has no position on this issue. So, and that certainly influenced some. When I was president of the League, it was amazing. People would call up and say, how should I vote? Well, you know, I'll send you the literature. I don't tell you how, but I always felt that was how respected the organization was. But with television and a lot of the candidates' meetings, I honestly don't think we're as important as we used to be. And maybe we fulfilled our mission. You know, those things happen. It's okay.
Well, maybe the world still needs your neutrality.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
And
but
really giving fairness to both sides.
Yeah, and I think because women are better educated now, they're able to make up their mind more easily without our helping them do it. Because, you know, it's hard to believe, but those 50 housewives were different than the women today. That was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, and you, as you mentioned, being in Idaho and having that radio program was a real eye-opener for you.
It really was. That introduced me to the League. And I couldn't wait to join, but I didn't know how then, and I probably couldn't have anyway. But it was, you know, and the thing, I've worked on membership a lot because I do love people. And the thing we always found was that if you invite somebody who shows the least bit interest, invite them to League, it almost always takes. But you need to invite them, you need to offer to pick them up, you need to tell them where the meeting is, and then give them literature. And if they're League people, they'll join. And that always has worked. Nowadays, it's awfully hard because women just don't have the free time, and League takes a lot of time. And in the very early days, you were told, don't join League unless you will work. In other words, it wasn't a tea party. We were supposed to come and do our research and do our work and share our material with each other. You weren't just to come and sit. That was not part of League.
Right, it was supposed to be challenging and interesting for the members.
Absolutely, and you needed to learn. That was the important thing.
I think it's very interesting what you said about members, that you encouraged women so much that, you know, you did everything possible to kind of get them into the League and then into a unit.
Right.
All the way from personal or extending
next door neighbors. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's the way it worked. And then from League, they go and are appointed sometimes to commissions, and sometimes, I'm trying to think of some of the comprehensive plan, the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan. We always had members on that. The RTD Advisory Board, we have members on that right now. So our membership is not always visible, but we are appointed to various, and Boulder is very good about that. We're always included in important things.
And that is a great opening into how the Boulder City government, the Boulder County government, their various councils and commissions, how did all those officials and, you know, staff people receive the League of Women Voters?
Wonderfully well, wonderfully well. We believe in open records, we want open meetings, and we're listened to at any time on that, especially in Boulder. We have not had, sometimes maybe a little reluctance on some of the material, but if you go back the second time and say, I'm really interested, how do I get this? Sometimes you have to pay for the copies. You know, there are things that aren't as easy as they should be, but usually if you persevere, you will get what you need. I will say Boulder's a very open and easy community to work with.
so that members actually engage with the government, get their information, and use that then as a basis for
study. Absolutely. That's how we get our study material.
And yeah, and publication. I didn't realize that was the information flow.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in
return, you also read things. You also, I mean, it's very important that you do other research. You know, current events, good newspapers. I have always taken not only the local paper, but the state paper. I take the Denver Post to this day, because if you really want to know state issues, you need to have the best newspaper in your state. And that's important.
Wow, this organization sounds like it gives you a lot of satisfaction, but also that there's a lot of challenge too.
Well, and
there's a lot of commitment involved.
You read things a little more objectively than you would, and I'm sorry I can't give you better examples of that, but you read things a little more objectively than if you had not thought about the pros and cons of issues. And you ask, how do we decide things? We do it by a process called consensus. And sometimes new members have problems with consensus, because that's bringing that small group, I told you, usually under 12 or under, together to decide, and that's not always easy. And if you cannot get consensus, then you don't have a decision. That's how important it was for the women to stick together, that if they didn't have consensus, we did not have a position. So you know, by the time you have worked through this, argued with each other, discussed with each other, you have pretty well come to
a real sense of unity.
Yeah,
right.
Meeting of mind. And so therefore everybody is comfortable with the position that we take.
And that can be enormously powerful then for an organization to move forward,
yes,
isn't it?
Exactly. You've got to have, because then you have all your membership underneath you. And those program items are selected both locally, state, and national. And national conventions are wonderful fun, because local leagues, state, come with their issues and they want to make it a national study. So then the group has to decide whether we're going to vote to even study that item. You see, you can't just throw it out on the table. The group has to decide, yes, we can get enough information. Yes, our members care enough about this to do the work. Yes, we want to know the pros and cons of this. So those are really challenging programs.
So you can then generate an idea at the local level and then work at the local level, but you can also generate an idea that your local branch...
Usually state. Your local league, the state league, usually takes the issues to national. Yes. So okay. You want to have at least your state consensus behind you when you take it to the national convention. Okay, and there's state conventions and national conventions, just like parties.
And are they annual?
Yes, yes they are.
So there's enough going on that you can do it every year.
And
wow.
Each local league, based on their membership numbers, have the number of delegates to the state, and the state has the number of delegates, sort of like the Congress, a little bit like that. You see, that was obviously our blueprint to start the league, was the government.
That's an interesting reciprocity. You're always trying to make the government more democratic, and at the same time you took the structure of the government.
Exactly, we took their organization. Because we're all familiar with that, and that's also the way we're going to work, because we have to lobby on those levels too, and we have to work with our representatives. And I've always been very graciously received by any elected official. And we also, you know, our candidates meetings have, on the whole, we had a little trouble last time, but on the whole, the candidates are very willing to come to our meetings, and we have issue questions for them and give them an opportunity to tell us about themselves, you know, their personal history and their educational background and their governmental experience. So it's a very good. They're not so well attended because they're run on our public television station now, so, and usually run several times, Channel 27, and so you can turn on and see it before an election.
So the means of media have also changed how the league does things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, City Council now is covered by television, and in my early days, we always went together, and we covered local government. We went to meetings, and And we told them we're just auditing your meeting, but it helped them. You know, it was good for them, and it was good for us because we learned how our local government worked and how they made decisions. So it was a very eye-opener both ways. But we never spoke unless we had a position at any local governmental meeting, and that's still true today. Usually today now it's letters to the editor and something like that, and that was true in the early days also. But we did go to governmental entities and speak once we had a local position.
Now that we've talked a lot about the League and your involvement in the League, could you now talk a little bit about how you've used the League as a springboard, as you said, to be more interested in party politics, and just talk a little bit about that?
Well, when you're in League, it's awfully hard not to want to vote for and work for a particular candidate. So when you're not on the board of directors or not very visible in League, you're welcome to do that. And I enjoy doing that because sometimes you feel that the candidate you're interested in is having a hard time and you are able to contribute something. And so I very much enjoyed that, and I also enjoyed working on issues, which at this age I don't do so much. But I've gone door to door with flyers, and I've gone door to door as two. Women always in my day, and I really feel it's more important today too, that we go as two together. It's just a little nice thing to do. But I enjoy that very, very much. And I enjoy the League too. I don't know, my father was political, and we had those family political discussions around the table, as most of us had. So I just kind of like working and being involved with a candidate, but not exclusively. I still and issues are tremendously important, we all know that.
So your parents and maybe your siblings and you all got to, when you were growing up, got to really hear about the government,
right,
and what was going on in the community.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We enjoyed that very, very much.
So that was a pretty strong influence for
absolutely.
you.
That predated League, but that made me open to League. So every step leads to another step.
Well, that is a good motto to remember.
And also, I have to say, the Chautauqua movement, you know, was started by women also. School teachers, and particularly the Boulder Chautauqua, was started by a bunch of women from Texas school teachers, because school teachers were not married women. Do we all know about that? They were not married women, because married women's husbands were supposed to support them, so the school teachers had to support themselves. So they came and started our local Chautauqua. So I have great respect for those women who came in the summer, of course, to get out of the Texas heat, but to be on their own and to start a Chautauqua in little bitty Boulder County, which I think partly helped Boulder be a more open community, as it was and still is. It was always very open. And for many years Boulder was very Republican, and now it's gone the other way, and now it's very Democratic. And the state has become more Democratic, so it's been fun historically to see how Boulder has evolved.
Well, great. Are there other things about the League or your political activism that you'd like to add?
Well, about the League, I'd like to say that I'm very thankful that we took in male members, men members, and the ones we have contribute. I think you're going to interview Bruce McKenzie if you haven't, and I'm sorry his wife Jeanette is gone, because she had a unit meeting in her house for years and years and years, and Bruce sometimes was out in the kitchen listening, and I think he couldn't wait to be a member, so I think he was our first male member. And of course, it's a little barrier to have our name, but we did decide to keep it. But men members are so welcome, and they do add another dimension to our point of view. But again, it's hard for a full-time employed person to have their job, their family, and also to be active in League. Nowadays, they're very welcome to come to any meeting they want to, and many do. But it's more difficult, and I do feel that League is not as important as it was 50 years ago, just because other groups have stepped forward to fill in some of the blanks that League filled. And so it's just an evolutionary thing, and I'm not sad about it. I think it just happened. But I think for some of the men it's fun to see, you know, how cohesive we were and how important that was, because that's what got us to be able to have the vote, is because we stuck together. And we still do it, and it's great.
Well, I would also like to, you sort of addressed the whole idea that that men are allowed in the organization.
More than allowed. They're encouraged. They're welcome. Okay. Much more than allowed it. And at the beginning, it wasn't so much that we didn't want them, it was just the evolution of how we evolved into the organization that we became. But nowadays, men are so welcome, and we love to have them.
But it remains a majority women's organization.
Absolutely, it does, and I think the name is part of that. And also maybe the men, I don't know, but they certainly appreciate our voter information. And every male candidate almost always answers our questionnaires, sends in their material, so they're very respectful. And I think they see us historically also, because some of our candidates, their mothers were members of the League, you know, so we go back a long way.
Now, how have you, given all the evolution of women's changing roles, how have you managed to keep your membership up at such high levels?
Well, I don't know if that really is, that's very static level. The 200, I think, has been, for a number of years we have held that. And I think it's worked, and it's I don't know. I honestly don't know, but we have held about we've dropped down a time or two to 193, but we hold up pretty much at 200. I'm not sure we are today at 200, but we do, because I think even when you are not active in League, and now that we're allowed you to support it with your dues and with contributions, because the one thing, because we do political action, you cannot deduct any contribution to League, because we're not, you know, we're political, so you cannot deduct it. So that gives some people a little twinge when they want to make a contribution, because they cannot count that as a contribution on their income tax. So I don't know. I think it's just because we appreciate so much what kind of organization we are and have been. I do think there's some carryover from the early days, and respect for that.
Right, and then that becomes a magnet for at least those people that want to be civically engaged. Which
I hope so. I hope so.
At times is challenging in the 21st century.
Yes, they are. And people don't have as much time. So they respect the research that we do. It is good. You know, it's good research. We do good research.
Well, you have kind of addressed this question, but I still want to ask you, how have you changed because of your involvement in the League?
Oh, probably more self-confident, certainly, because I started quite young. I was very early 30s, and that sounds not so young, but it was, because I hadn't been out in the community as much. So probably self-confidence, knowing that I can find out what I need to know, what I want to know. I know how to do the research. I know how to run a meeting. That's really very important. And a lot of people who have had just a business background do not know how to run a meeting, and that's really important. So, and plus friendship and working together, because anybody you work with and you're like minds, then you end up being friends. And that's nice too, because you know the person across the room is thinking the way you're thinking, and that's very comforting and reassuring and fun.
It is, and so many League members that I've talked to have mentioned the importance of friendship.
Oh yeah, it is. It's really good.
And how supportive that is. Do you have any personal stories or anecdotes about your experiences in the League?
Well, I told you about the one going to the jail, which was so heart-rending and so touching, and so much that we as women were needed. I mean, that was the one, I think, Anne Marie, that just was unbelievable to me, because it was so bad, because League is always middle class. Remember that. We are a middle class organization. We're middle class people. And here come these middle class women to tour your jail. You know, just our being there made a difference in a lot of instances, but that was the most important and most heart-rending for me. That's the one that just always comes to the top, because to think that we were treating women like that in this day and age was just so heartbreaking for us. It was horrible. So I'm afraid I can't think of another one. I think our successes, we almost always work for the open space elections in Boulder County, and we've always been successful. So, you know, that sort of thing, those kind of successes are really, really good. It's nice to be successful. It's nice to win.
And do you have any also any experiences with any particular women in politics that you'd like to add? Or?
Well, I'm friends with Josie Heath, who is, you know, and I certainly, if you talk about mentors, probably Janet Roberts. Her husband came here with the Bureau of Standards. I think when we came IBMers, the League was most members' husbands were either university, and so therefore you were university wives, or the Bureau of Standards, and there were bureau wives. But Janet sort of was the most outstanding and the kindest and the most patient. And we all just loved her. And she also did so much on city council, and she never voted without doing her research and knowing what she was doing, and that was her League background. Because I think Janet had lived with Walter in Alaska, and she told us stories about hanging out the baby's diapers, you know, till they froze and then dried and that kind of thing. So Janet was outstanding, and so was Ruth, but Janet was probably most special to me, and we were always so proud of her. And she spoke, you know, and when an issue would come up issues recycle sometimes, they come around again. So it's nice that League has the memory of some issues that they can speak to again. The blue line, or where we're going to have water, where we're going to have development because of the comprehensive plan, those sorts of things. League does have a memory, and that's nice. And Janet was particularly good about that. And I'm sorry to tell you, I don't know if anybody else is doing that right now. But we've got the material. I'm sure we can dig it out for anybody who needs it.
Well, I'm sure it's those kinds of issues will always be alive in Boulder County because Boulder is like an environmental center. So I think, and League was part of making it one.
Well, because intelligent, educated people came here, and that opened up the whole issue. And you know, it's just a wonderful place to live, and you feel very safe and secure, and it's a good place to live. It really is. And I thank you for interviewing me. I've enjoyed it so very much, Anne Marie, and congratulations on your study, and good luck in your work.
Thank you so much.